The massive starship hung in Earth's orbit like a giant metal shark, its sleek hull gleaming against the darkness of space. Inside the command center, Commander Jae-sung studied the holographic displays with a mix of confidence and curiosity. His species, the Krell, had conquered countless worlds, and Earth seemed like just another simple target. "Scan complete," announced his junior officer, Mikara. Her tentacles flickered with excitement as she projected the planetary data. Minimal military resistance detected. Primitive weapon systems, scattered defense installations. Jae-sung nodded, his scaled skin rippling with a shade of victory green. The Krell invasion force had perfected their conquest strategy over thousands of planetary campaigns. They would strike quickly, overwhelm local defenses, and establish control before the inhabitants could even understand what was happening. The holographic display showed detailed images of Earth's surface. Mikara pointed out various military bases, communication centers, and government buildings. But what caught Jae-sung's attention were the strange clusters of small buildings in suburban areas. Rows of neat houses with tiny gardens, each looking almost identical, but with subtle differences. "What are these?" he asked, zooming in on one particular neighborhood in Colorado. Mikara adjusted the image. "Residential zones. Appears to be living spaces for multiple generations of humans. Our initial reports suggest these are habitats for older members of their species." Jae-sung chuckled. In most civilizations, older individuals were considered weak, unable to contribute to defense or survival. The fact that humans allowed their elderly to live in such comfortable, separate communities seemed like a sign of their species' inefficiency. "Prepare the first landing teams," he ordered. "We'll start with Sector 7 Delta. Those residential zones look perfect for a quick, clean invasion." Across the ship, thousands of Krell soldiers prepared their advanced exosuits. Each suit was a marvel of technology, built with adaptive armor, energy shields, and weapons that could vaporize solid matter in milliseconds. The soldiers checked their plasma rifles, quantum disruptors, and neural network communication devices. They had no idea what was waiting for them. On Earth, in a small house with blue shutters and a well-maintained front lawn, Haija was brewing her morning tea. At 73 years old, she moved with a precision that came from decades of routine. Her hands, weathered but strong, arranged her favorite porcelain cup and saucer. A photograph of her late husband stood nearby, watching over her as always. Outside, her garden was her pride and joy. Perfectly trimmed roses, healthy vegetable patches, and a collection of tools that told stories of years of careful maintenance. What the alien invaders didn't know was that Haija had survived more challenges in her lifetime than most soldiers would face in 10 generations. She had raised 3 children during economic hardships. She had helped her community through natural disasters. She had learned to adapt, to survive, and most importantly, to protect what she loved. As the first alien dropships pierced Earth's atmosphere, Haija simply smiled and put on her gardening gloves. Something told her this was going to be an interesting day. The Krell invasion fleet descended through the clouds, their ships creating sonic booms that shattered windows and set off car alarms. Thousands of soldiers prepared to make their first landing, confident in their technological superiority. They were about to learn a fundamental truth about humanity. Never underestimate a grandparent protecting their home. Commander Jae-sung watched the initial landing coordinates on his display, a smug expression of anticipated victory spreading across his alien features. He had no way of knowing that the real battle was about to begin, not with military might, but with something far more powerful. The wisdom, creativity, and fierce protective instinct of human grandparents. The first wave of Krell soldiers landed with a thunderous roar. Their massive dropships crushed perfectly manicured lawns and pushed aside garden fences. Metal feet stomped on flower beds, leaving deep marks in the soft earth. Each soldier stood nearly 9 feet tall, their exosuits gleaming with advanced technology that promised total destruction. Haija watched from her front porch. She didn't panic. She didn't run. Instead, She slowly put down her teacup and adjusted her reading glasses. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. Most people might have fled, but not the residents of this particular street. Decades of life experience had taught them something important. Staying calm was the first line of defense. The lead alien soldier, designated Kral 7, scanned the area with advanced sensors. His neural network picked up minimal heat signatures, mostly from inside the houses. He signaled to his team to prepare for a standard occupation protocol. Clear the area. Secure the location. Move forward. What Kral 7 didn't understand was that he had just walked into a trap decades in the making. HFY's garden wasn't just a collection of plants. It was a carefully designed defensive system. The rose bushes weren't ordinary roses. They were special hybrid varieties that her late husband had spent years developing. Each plant was strategically placed. Each tool was within easy reach. When the first alien boot crushed her prized tomato plants, something inside HFY changed. She stepped off the porch. Her gardening gloves were old but strong. In her right hand, she held a garden trowel that had seen more battles than most military weapons. Her left hand carried a spray bottle, seemingly innocent, but filled with a special mixture she had developed years ago to fight persistent garden pests. "You," she said quietly, "are going to regret stepping on my tomatoes." The alien soldiers couldn't understand her words, but they understood her tone. It was the same tone that said, "Don't you dare track mud into my clean house," or "I know exactly what you did, and you're in trouble." Kral 7 raised his plasma weapon. It could vaporize solid matter in milliseconds, but HFY was faster. Her first move was to spray the nearest alien's exosuit with her special mixture. It wasn't a weapon by military standards, but a combination of organic compounds she had developed to fight plant diseases. The liquid reacted with the advanced alien technology in ways no one could have predicted. The exosuit's sensors went crazy. Electronic systems started to malfunction. Communication networks broke down. Then she threw her garden trowel. It wasn't a throw meant to kill. It was a precise strike learned from years of working in tight garden spaces. The trowel hit exactly the right spot on the alien suit, jamming a critical sensor cluster. Across the street, other houses began to show signs of life. Another elderly resident, Du-jun, emerged with his collection of wind chimes. But these weren't ordinary wind chimes. They were precisely tuned communication devices he had developed during his years as a military communications expert. The sound they produced interfered with the aliens' advanced communication systems. Random frequencies, complex patterns, absolute chaos. More grandparents appeared, some with garden tools, some with cleaning supplies, some with baking equipment. Each item became a potential weapon in their hands. The aliens had prepared for military resistance. They had planned for tanks, fighter jets, and missile systems. They were not prepared for angry grandparents defending their gardens. Kral 7 realized something was very wrong. His advanced battle computer couldn't process the chaos happening around him. How could these small, seemingly weak humans be so effective? And this was just the beginning. The first battle for Earth wasn't going to be won with advanced technology. It was going to be won with experience, creativity, and an absolute refusal to let anyone mess with a perfectly maintained garden. Miles away from the first battle, in a quiet senior living community, Du-jun sat in the common room. To anyone watching, he looked like a typical retired senior enjoying his morning coffee. But his eyes were sharp, scanning multiple communication devices hidden cleverly around the room. The first alert came through an unexpected channel. Martha, who ran the community's knitting club, tapped out a complex message using her knitting needles against her chair's metal frame. It was a communication method they had practiced for years, a system developed during her days as a Cold War-era cryptographer. Invasion detected, the message read, Sector 7 Delta compromised. Within minutes, the senior living community transformed. What had looked like a peaceful retirement home became a command center that would make military strategists weep with admiration. Du-jun, a former military communications expert, began coordinating. His past wasn't just a story of old service. He had spent decades developing communication networks that could work under any condition. The aliens thought they had superior technology. They had no idea what human innovation looked like. Helen. He called to a woman arranging flowers near the window. Activate the neighborhood watch protocol. Helen nodded. She pulled out a seemingly ordinary tablet. But this device was anything but normal. Modified over years by tech-savvy retirees, it could bounce signals through multiple unlikely channels: home security systems, smart refrigerators, even children's game consoles. The first response came from Haija's neighborhood. A detailed report transmitted through a frequency that would look like nothing more than background noise to alien sensors. Garden tools used as communication devices. Chemical compositions of homemade pest sprays detailed as tactical information. Across the country, similar scenes played out. In Florida, a retirement community turned its daily bingo game into a complex intelligence-gathering operation. In Arizona, a group of retired engineers transformed their weekly poker night into a strategic planning session. The aliens' first mistake was thinking that age meant weakness. Their second mistake was believing technology could overcome human creativity. Dujun's team began to map the alien landing zones, but they weren't using military maps. They used something far more detailed: community knowledge. Every garden, every street corner, every hidden path known only to people who had lived in these neighborhoods for decades. We need to disrupt their communication, Dujun told the room. No one argued. No one seemed surprised. These were people who had seen the world change multiple times, and alien invasion was just another challenge. Martha's Knitting Club became a communication hub. Each knitted pattern contained hidden messages. Colors and stitches that looked random to an outsider were actually a complex coding system. They had been practicing this for years. What started as a fun hobby had become a sophisticated communication network. In the kitchen, Harold, a retired chemist, began mixing cleaning supplies. Not for cleaning, but for creating disruption tools. He understood chemical interactions better than most military scientists. What looked like simple household items would become weapons of surprising effectiveness. The senior living community's Wi-Fi network became something else entirely. A complex web of communication that could pass information faster than any alien technology could track. Old computers, modified routers, communication methods that predated digital technology. Outside, the first wave of alien dropships continued their invasion. They had no idea that the real resistance wasn't going to come from military bases or government bunkers. It was going to come from grandparents who had survived world changes, raised families through tough times, and knew how to solve problems with nothing more than creativity and determination. Dujun looked at the growing map of alien landing zones and smiled. The invasion was about to get interesting, and the aliens had no idea what was coming. Commander Jae-sung stared at his battle screens in complete confusion. The invasion that was supposed to be a simple planetary takeover had turned into something he couldn't understand. His advanced computer systems were failing, not because of direct attacks, but because of the most random interference imaginable. Surveillance drones would suddenly lose connection. Communication networks would break down for no clear reason. And worst of all, his soldiers were reporting incidents that made no sense at all. In one report, an entire squad of elite Krull soldiers had been neutralized by what appeared to be a collection of garden tools and cleaning supplies. Another team reported being completely confused by a series of wind chimes that seemed to create impossible communication disruptions. Some whose woodworking shed had become something entirely unexpected. What looked like a simple hobby workshop was now a weapons modification center that would make any military engineer jealous. Years of precise woodworking had taught him how to modify and adapt tools with incredible skill. He took apart alien communication devices that had been captured in the first wave of the invasion. Then he rebuilt them, not to use them as they were intended, but to create something entirely new. A communication jammer that worked on principles the aliens couldn't understand. Technology is just a puzzle, Sun Wu mumbled to himself, adjusting his glasses and carefully connecting some wires. His hands, steady from decades of delicate woodworking, moved with a precision that no young soldier could match. Nearby, Yunhe's knitting circle had transformed into something far more dangerous than a simple social gathering. Each knitted item contained hidden communication devices. The patterns weren't just decorative. They were a complex coding system that could transmit information faster than any alien technology. The aliens had prepared for traditional warfare. They had studied human military capabilities. They had mapped out potential resistance zones, but they had made one critical mistake. They had completely underestimated human grandparents. In another part of the country, a group of retired engineers were busy. They took apart captured alien technology and rebuilt it in ways the original designers could never have imagined. A smart refrigerator became a communication hub. An old microwave was modified into an electronic warfare device. Dujum's communication network grew more complex by the hour. Each senior living community became a node in a massive, interconnected system of resistance. They used technologies the aliens couldn't track. Old radio frequencies, landline systems, communication methods that predated digital technology. The first alien commanders began to panic. Their battle algorithms were designed to predict military responses. But these weren't military responses. These were the actions of people who had spent decades solving complex life problems. A garden trowel became a precision tool. A batch of homemade cookies contained hidden communication devices. Wind chimes became signal disruptors. Nothing was what it seemed. Commander Jae-sung received another impossible report. An entire alien landing team had been neutralized by a group of seniors using nothing more than gardening tools, cleaning supplies, and what appeared to be a very complicated knitting pattern. "This is impossible," he muttered, watching the battle screens. But it was happening. The real war wasn't being fought with advanced weapons. It was being fought with creativity, experience, and an absolute refusal to give up. The aliens had invaded a planet of problem solvers. And these problem solvers were grandparents, who had decades of experience in solving the most impossible challenges imaginable. The invasion was about to get a lot more complicated. The alien technology was impressive. Advanced sensors that could detect movement through solid walls. Communication networks that could transmit data faster than light. Weapons that could destroy entire buildings with a single pulse. But they were about to meet their match. In a small garage in suburban Colorado, Harold, a retired chemical engineer, was doing something extraordinary. He looked at the captured alien device with the same curiosity he once used to solve complex industrial problems. Around him, an array of seemingly random household items told a different story. Cleaning supplies, cooking ingredients, garden chemicals. To an untrained eye, it looked like a messy workbench. To Harold, it was a laboratory of pure potential. The alien communication drone sat on his workbench. Most military experts would try to dismantle it or copy its technology. Harold had a different approach. He wanted to understand it. And more importantly, he wanted to break it. His first test was simple. A mixture of household cleaning chemicals that he had perfected over decades of dealing with stubborn stains. He knew exactly how different compounds reacted. What looked like a random spray was actually a carefully calculated solution. When the liquid touched the alien device, something unexpected happened. The drone's advanced sensors began to malfunction. Its communication network started sending out random signals, bits of information that made no sense. Frequency patterns that looked like noise, but were actually a complex disruption method. Across town, Yoonhee was doing something equally remarkable. Her knitting circle had become a communication hub that would make any military intelligence agency jealous. Each knitted pattern contained hidden messages. Colors and stitch types that looked random were actually a sophisticated coding system. The aliens had advanced translation devices. They could decode most known languages in seconds, but they had never encountered a communication method based on knitting patterns. Dujun's communication network grew more complex by the hour. Each senior living community became a node in a massive interconnected system of resistance. They used technologies the aliens couldn't track: old radio frequencies, landline systems, communication methods that predated digital technology. Commander Jae-sung watched his battle screens in total confusion. His advanced computer systems were failing in ways that made no sense. Surveillance drones would suddenly lose connection. Communication networks would break down for no clear reason. The first wave of alien soldiers had expected a simple invasion. They had studied human military capabilities. They had mapped out potential resistance zones. They had prepared for every possible scenario. Except for this. Sun Wu's woodworking shed had become a modification center that would make any military engineer jealous. Years of precise woodworking had taught him how to adapt and modify tools with incredible skill. He took apart alien communication devices and rebuilt them into something entirely new. "Technology is just a puzzle," he would mumble, adjusting his glasses and carefully connecting wires with hands that had spent decades creating precise wooden objects. The aliens had one critical weakness. Their technology was designed around predictable patterns. They could adapt quickly, but they relied on logic and mathematical predictions. They had no understanding of human creativity, and creativity was something these grandparents had in endless supply. A garden trowel became a precision tool. A batch of homemade cookies contained hidden communication devices. Wind chimes became signal disruptors. Nothing was what it seemed. The real war wasn't being fought with advanced weapons. It was being fought with experience, problem-solving skills, and an absolute refusal to give up. The invasion was about to get a lot more complicated, and the aliens had no idea what was coming. The neighborhood looked peaceful, too peaceful. What the alien invaders didn't know was that this quiet street was about to become their worst nightmare. Retired mechanics from the local community center had been busy. Old trucks and cars that looked like they belonged in a museum were now something entirely different. Each vehicle had been modified into a mobile defense platform that would make military engineers scratch their heads in confusion. Frank, who had spent 40 years fixing cars, knew every inch of these vehicles. What looked like a rusty pickup truck was now a sophisticated mobile communication center. The engine had been replaced with a hybrid system that could run on multiple fuel types. Hidden compartments were filled with equipment that looked like random junk, but were actually advanced defensive tools. Across the street, a group of retired teachers began their own special operation. They had spent decades managing classrooms full of energetic children. An alien invasion was just another challenge to solve. Martha, who had taught chemistry for over 30 years, was mixing something in her kitchen. It didn't look like a weapon. It looked like a batch of cookies. But these cookies were special. Each ingredient had been carefully selected. The mixture would create a substance that could disable alien technology in ways no military weapon could. "Cooking is just chemistry with love," she would often say. Today, that chemistry was going to save the planet. The first wave of alien ground troops approached. Their advanced exosuits gleamed in the sunlight. Sensors scanned the area. Everything looked quiet. Too quiet. They didn't see the trap being set. Dujun's communication network was working perfectly. Each senior living community had become a node in a massive, interconnected resistance system. They used technologies the aliens couldn't track: old radio frequencies, landline systems, communication methods that predated digital technology. The neighborhood came alive. Garden tools became weapons. Cleaning supplies turned into chemical disruptors. Knitting needles became precision tools. Wind chimes created impossible signal interference. The aliens had prepared for military resistance. They had studied human weapon systems. They had mapped out potential combat zones. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Some whose woodworking skills turned ordinary objects into defensive tools. A simple wooden fence became a complex sensor array. Garden decorations were modified to create electronic interference. Yoon-hee's knitting circle continued their work. Each knitted item contained hidden communication devices. The patterns weren't just decorative. They were a complex coding system that could transmit information faster than any alien technology. The first alien soldiers didn't know what hit them. Signals went crazy. Communication systems failed. Their advanced technology suddenly became useless. Devices that could normally detect movement through solid walls now showed nothing but confusion. A batch of cookies disabled their sensor systems. A garden hose created impossible electrical interference. Wind chimes disrupted their communication networks. Commander Jae-sung watched his battle screens in total disbelief. His invasion plan was falling apart in the most ridiculous ways possible. Entire squads of elite soldiers were being neutralized by people who looked like they should be enjoying retirement. This wasn't a military defense. This was chaos created by people who had spent decades solving impossible problems. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated human grandparents. And now, the counteroffensive had begun. The real war was just getting started. The Galactic Confederation's leadership watched in horror. Their invasion reports didn't make sense. How could a planetary defense be so effective when there were no traditional military responses? Commander Jae-sung sat in the main command center, his alien skin turning a pale shade of panic green. "Explain this," he demanded of his senior officers. The holographic displays showed something impossible. Entire squadrons of elite Krell soldiers were being defeated by what appeared to be random household items. A garden trowel had disabled a 1,000,000-credit advanced sensor system. A batch of homemade cookies had created electronic interference that stopped advanced dropships. It didn't make any sense. Mikara, Jae-sung's junior officer, tried to compile a report. But every time she thought she understood the pattern, something new would happen. One moment, a group of seniors would use gardening tools to create an impossible defense. The next moment, knitting patterns would disrupt communication networks. The truth was becoming clear. The human military wasn't the real threat. The grandparents were. Back on Earth, Dujun's senior living community had become a war room that would make military strategists weep with admiration. Every resident had a role. Every person contributed something unique. Years of life experience had taught them one important lesson. Problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved. Helen, who had been a cryptographer during the Cold War, was tracking alien communication patterns. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, saw things the aliens' advanced computers missed. She could predict their communication strategies before they even sent a signal. In another part of the country, Harold continued his chemical warfare. But this wasn't traditional warfare. This was something entirely different. He understood how different compounds reacted. What looked like a simple cleaning solution was actually a carefully designed technological disruptor. The aliens had advanced translation devices. They could decode most known languages in seconds, but they had never encountered a communication method based on knitting patterns, gardening techniques, and decades of problem-solving experience. Sunwoo's woodworking shed had become something between a mad scientist's laboratory and a military modification center. He took apart alien technology and rebuilt it in ways the original designers could never have imagined. An old microwave became an electronic warfare device. A smart refrigerator transformed into a communication hub. Commander Jae-sung received another impossible report. An entire alien landing team had been neutralized by a group of seniors using nothing more than a garden trowel, some cleaning supplies, a complicated knitting pattern, homemade cookies. "This is impossible," he muttered. But it was happening. The Galactic Confederation's leadership began to panic. Their invasion reports were a mess of confusion. How could a species defeat their most advanced military with such random items? The real war wasn't being fought with advanced weapons. It was being fought with creativity, experience, an absolute refusal to give up. The aliens had invaded a planet of problem solvers, and these problem solvers were grandparents. Grandparents who had raised families through tough times, solved impossible problems, survived economic changes, adapted to technological revolutions. They had skills the aliens couldn't understand: improvisation, creativity, the ability to turn any object into a solution. Jae-sung realized the terrible truth that would be recorded in galactic history. Human soldiers were just a distraction. The real warriors were the grandparents. And they were just getting started. The alien diplomatic ship landed in a small suburban park. It was not what they had expected. No military generals, no government officials, just a group of seniors sitting around a carefully arranged table. Sun Woo adjusted his glasses and poured tea. Haija brought out a plate of homemade cookies. Martha carefully spread a handmade tablecloth that looked simple but contained more communication devices than the aliens' entire diplomatic suite. Commander Jae-sung stepped out of the ship. His alien translator worked perfectly, but he was about to learn that language was more than just words. "We are here to negotiate," he began formally. Du-jun, who had spent years in military communications, smiled. It was the kind of smile that made experienced negotiators nervous. A smile that said he knew something nobody else did. The negotiations were nothing like the aliens had planned. Instead of discussing surrender or occupation, the grandparents started talking about something entirely different: garden supplies, cleaning technologies, home improvement tools. "We will consider your surrender," Haija said, passing a plate of cookies, "if you provide us with some advanced cleaning technologies." The alien commander was confused. Most species would demand territorial rights, resource compensation, military guarantees. These humans wanted cleaning supplies. Harold, the retired chemical engineer, explained in detail. Their planet needed better ways to clean without harming the environment. The aliens' advanced technologies could solve many household problems. Martha's knitting circle sat nearby. Each member was carefully observing, their knitting needles moving in patterns that were actually complex communication devices. They were recording every moment of the negotiation. Sun Woo pulled out a detailed list. It wasn't a list of military demands. It was a wish list of technological improvements for gardening tools, home maintenance equipment, cooking technologies, cleaning systems. The aliens were completely lost. Commander Jae-sung realized something important. These weren't just negotiations. This was a demonstration of human problem-solving skills. They had turned a potential planetary invasion into a technology exchange program. Yoon-hee brought out more tea. Each teacup was carefully placed. Each movement was deliberate. What looked like a simple tea service was actually a complex information-gathering operation. The diplomatic team from the Galactic Confederation looked at each other in confusion. This was not how planetary conquests were supposed to go. "We want your best cleaning robots," Haija said firmly, "and some advanced gardening technologies." The aliens would later report that they didn't surrender to military might. They surrendered to a group of seniors who knew exactly what they wanted. And what they wanted was to make their homes cleaner and their gardens better. Du-jun explained their terms, not in military language, but in a language of problem solvers who had seen the world change multiple times. The negotiation lasted hours, but it wasn't a tense meeting. There was laughter, shared cookies, discussions about technology that had nothing to do with warfare. Commander Jae-sung realized something important. Humans weren't just a species. They were a collection of problem solvers, each generation bringing something unique to the table. And the grandparents, they were the most dangerous problem solvers of all. As the negotiations concluded, the aliens agreed to provide advanced cleaning technologies, next-generation gardening tools, household maintenance robots, environmental restoration equipment. In return, the humans would share their most dangerous weapon, their ability to solve any problem, no matter what. 6 months after the invasion, things looked different. Suburban neighborhoods had changed. Alien cleaning robots worked in perfectly maintained gardens. Advanced technological tools sat next to traditional gardening equipment. Haija's front yard was now a perfect mix of human determination and alien technology. The Galactic Confederation had learned something important. Humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were problem solvers, adapters, survivors. Commander Jae-sung had been reassigned, but he couldn't forget what had happened. The invasion that turned into a technology exchange. The grandparents who had defeated an entire advanced army without firing a single traditional weapon. In the senior living community, Do-jun continued his work. Now he was teaching younger generations about communication, not just how to use new technologies, but how to solve problems creatively. The alien technologies had brought unexpected changes. Harold's chemical research took new directions. The cleaning robots could do things no human machine had ever done before, but they still needed human creativity to work perfectly. Sun Wu's woodworking shed now included alien tools, but his hands still moved with the same precision. Technology was just another tool. The real magic was in how you used it. Martha's knitting circle had become something special. They now created communication patterns using both human and alien technologies. Their meetings looked like social gatherings, but they were actually complex problem-solving sessions. The world had changed, but the most important things remained the same. The aliens had learned some important lessons. Never underestimate experience. Creativity matters more than technology. Problem-solving is the most powerful weapon. Yoonhee's garden became a symbol of what happened. Alien plants grew next to traditional Earth plants, each one carefully tended, each one telling a story of survival and adaptation. The Galactic Confederation's reports were now required reading in their military academies, not as a story of defeat, but as a lesson in understanding different species. Haija would often sit on her front porch. The alien cleaning robot would be working in her garden. Her grandchildren would play nearby. Sometimes she would look at the sky and smile. They had saved the planet, not with weapons, but with something much more powerful. Human creativity. The neighborhood looked peaceful, but everyone knew the truth. These were the real defenders of Earth, not soldiers, not young fighters, but grandparents who had seen the world change multiple times. Do-jun sometimes taught communication classes to younger people. His lessons were different now. Technology is just a tool, he would say. The real power is in how you think, how you solve problems, how you adapt. The alien technologies had brought amazing changes. Better cleaning systems, advanced gardening tools, improved communication networks, environmental restoration technologies. But the most important thing remained unchanged: the human spirit, the ability to look at a problem and say, "We can solve this," no matter what challenges came. Commander Jae-sung would later write a report that would become famous in galactic history. It wasn't about military might. It was about understanding. The report's final line became a famous quote: "Humans are not a species to be conquered. They are a species to be understood." And it all started with a group of grandparents who refused to let anyone mess with their gardens. The end.